So I was hanging out one afternoon with my 6-year-old niece who is an avid Apple iPad fan. And by avid Apple iPad fan, I mean all she cares about is playing Roblox on and her other mobile games that 6-year-old children play nowadays. For a rare minute, however, she took her eyes off of her precious iPad and onto my Motorola Razr 5G lying on top of a table with an ostentatious sparkle in her eye. From there, she picked up the folded foreign object and twiddled her way to flipping it open. She was amazed. Then it hit me. This wasn't a child being cute and oblivious to something obvious that they'll eventually learn how to use. This was the case of a bygone form of technology no longer relevant to modern society. Enter the Moto Razr 2020 5G. This is a second generation product in the same year as the first generation product of a revival of a 16-year-old product. Confusing, right? As the follow-up of the first folding phone from Motorola, the current Razr has added 5G connectivity to its arsenal as well as all-around refinement of an otherwise surprisingly well-built product. I didn't have the first generation phone, so I was actually very surprised that this phone feels pretty nice in the hand. For those folding phones that have a clamshell build, I like classifying it into two parts, the outer shell and the inner screen. The outer shell of the phone is carved out of aluminium with a fingerprint scanner embedded into the Motorola logo. It's a bit of a unnatural position for your finger to touch, but you do get used to it with time. As far as accuracy goes, the sensor works pretty well for the most part. There are the occasional misses and lockups, but it's a passing grade for sure. The front part of the shell is actually a secondary display. It's what Motorola says is a 2.7-inch GOLED panel that is 600 by 800 pixels. Let's actually dive into this right now, as this is something that does make this phone quite unique. Like, no other phone does it like this phone does. Unlike the Samsung Galaxy Flip, the Razr actually gives you a fully functional display that works with applications. It's not a ticker bar that lags along for basic notifications like that said Samsung phone. This automatically elevates the Razr on my list of functionality in regards to folding phones. They actually have things that add to it. To put this into perspective, I can open up, say, Reddit, Facebook Messenger, and even YouTube on this tiny display to quickly browse or gather information I want without flipping the phone open. Not all of the apps are optimized for this tiny screen, and they will never be. The Razr just doesn't have the user base to warrant app development support from these developers, from the apps. However, that doesn't detract from the value this display actually adds to the user experience right now. I personally use it for like a quick calculator and a timer, glancing at notifications, and to respond to short messages. I will say that I felt the need to use a case covering for this shell, as this is an exposed display on the outside of the body. When that is attached, it does make it harder to navigate the display, especially when swiping upwards, as the lip of the case does interfere with the actions that you need with your finger. When you combine the motor gestures like twist to activate the camera with the secondary display, you can actually snap a photo using that tiny display as a viewfinder. It's a nifty trick, but in this sense, I actually prefer Samsung's implementation of folding the phone in half and angling the camera like a makeup mirror to take selfies. I like that a lot better than this. Speaking of cameras, if you take a selfie with the phone clamshelled, you're using that main camera sensor, which is a 48 megapixel f1.7. That's going to give you a sharper photo than if you took it with a selfie in a traditional format using a phone's front-facing sensor, which in this case is a 20 megapixel f2.2 shooter. How much sharper is it though? Probably not enough to matter, as the main shooter just isn't on par with most of the top brands out there for flagships. It's not horrible per se, especially when you consider Motorola's track record of subpar shooters in the past, so this is an improvement. I can live with this camera, but the results are noticeably a bit weaker in basically all aspects of composition. The detail and clarity of your shots vary drastically depending on your source light. That is typically the case for any camera, but I don't see any consistency at all when using the Razr. It's a crapshoot what to expect with this camera. I did take one of my all-time favorite photos of Chunks, my dog, her nickname. I nicknamed her Chunks, using this phone. But when you consider that the Moto Razr 5G costs north of $1,000, it's harder to take average as a result for this camera performance. The same can be said about the processor. Unlike their competitors out there, Motorola's experimental designs don't contain the highest end processors to match that extravagant aura of a product. The Qualcomm Snapdragon 765G processor runs here, and it uses 8GB of RAM and 256GB of storage. With that said, most people who buy this phone will be satisfied with the end result of day-to-day usage. Unless you're playing heavy mobile games, you're probably going to have a hard time noticing speed differences with a flagship processor. Yes, it is slower, but not by enough to influence your opinion of the performance, at least for everyday use. Gaming is where the processor noticeably has a difficult time handling the load, especially when you compare it to similar price single-slab phones. App crashes and lag does occasionally happen, even with the Motorola game optimization. I surmise the target demographic on this phone won't be playing anything that will push the Razr to its limits, so this isn't really relevant to many people who are looking to buy this phone or own this phone. What does kill the Razr 5G is the fact that it dies so quickly. Like, the battery life on this 2,800 mAh battery is abysmal, to say the least. I haven't used a phone with this bad of a battery life in quite a long time. Say I have like a full charge before I head out to the office by 10 a.m. latest. By the time I return home at 6 p.m., the Razr is already on life support with a single-digit percentage remaining. As always, I'm using just about the same daily usage with this phone as I do testing every phone, so it's the same use case. There is fast charging up to 15 watts through the USB-C connector, which helps alleviate the bad battery life slightly, but it's pretty difficult living with the Moto Razr simply because it doesn't live long. First world problems also compile, as I wish this had wireless charging, as I could simply plop it onto a Qi charger at work throughout the day. But we don't have that here either, so that does hurt a little bit. Finally, let's take a look at the main display panel when you open up the clamshell. This is one panel that is creased right down the center to provide a symmetric candy bar when opened up. The panel uses a plastic P OLED one that has a resolution of 876 by 2142p. The minute your fingers touch it, you are instinctively trained now to notice a difference after years of using Gorilla Glass. It just doesn't feel right. That doesn't mean it's bad per se, but you'll have to remove your pre-installed connotations about what a smartphone display should feel like before using this. And unlike the Galaxy Flip, the Razr's hinge cannot support its own body weight and sit standing up. It has to be fully open or fully closed to operate. That was one of the fun things I did appreciate about the Flip that I like with this clamshell form factor. This is a result of like a difficult philosophy regarding the hinge that is essential to these kind of phones. I also hear more creaking opening this phone and operating it than I did on any other folding device I've used to date. When it comes to viewing experience, I classify this as a middle of the pack. While it's serviceable to the eyes, you can clearly find better and sharper quality from other phones, even folding phones out there. We're paying for the unique design more so than top-notch experiences here. The same goes for the single bottom firing speaker. It doesn't get too loud, but at least it's relatively clear when it's at its highest value. The last thing I also wanted to mention is potentially the most damning thing about the Razr. I can't open it with one hand. I can't open it with one hand. To be precise, I guess I could technically do it, but it actually takes a lot of precision and is difficult to do it on the fly, and that ruins the entire point of having a flip phone. I was able to flip and close the Galaxy Flip with one hand like I used to do it in the 2000s. This is something Motorola really needs to kind of direct their attention to. It's vital that a modern flip phone has the same functionality that made the original flip phone so useful. Flipping it and closing it to answer and close a call. That quick flip to answer a phone call and flip to end a call is essential to the experience. While you can answer and end a call by using those actions, they aren't as polished as they need to be. The Razr 5G is a huge step in the right direction. I'm pleasantly surprised at how well it feels in my hand, closed and open. And I dare say I prefer this aluminium feel over the glass clamshell of the Galaxy Flip. Where it's ultimately falling behind Samsung is the actual smartphone stuff. Like, that's still kind of important, guys. I'm actually more confident in the Razr line after this phone than I was when they first relaunched it with its first incarnation. And that's always a good sign. The other day, my house was leaking, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do about this. I'm a tech guy. I only know tech, so how do I fix that? And then you subscribed and you fixed it, so thank you.